Everybody, this is House Education, March 21st, 2025. We have another great opportunity to hear from some young people in our schools. I'm actually going to turn the emceeing over to Representative Brady.
Thank you. I will let our witnesses introduce themselves in a moment, but I think a good introduction comes from the way that the Senate Education Committee ended yesterday when they got the VSA testimony that we had earlier in the week about kind of timeline and proposals, and it was a bit spicier conversation in their committee if you watch them much, but the ending was a really, to me, it gave me a strong glimmer of hope about all of what we were doing and a great discussion about let's not forget all the things that are working really well and going really well in our schools and catastrophize as if schools, there are challenges in our system, there are some stability factors, but there are a million great things happening in our schools all across the state every day, and we don't get to see those because we're here, but there was some just really nice testimony and discussion about that in that committee. And so to that end, I'm thrilled that we have some students with us today who I think represent that, both just the power of student voice and what's really authentic student engagement is can look like across our state, and they each, I think we'll talk a little bit about how they have come to that or what their roles are, but I certainly want to lift it up as another way of really great stuff happening in our schools and great stuff happening by young people who care a lot about our schools and our collective future. So we have three folks with us here today who are pretty dynamic, incredible young leaders to talk a bit about student voice, the ways that they have worked to really do that, and some hopes for us as we continue to work on big transformative legislation. Do you have an order you want to go in?
We do.
Okay.
But first I was thinking just outline what we're
awesome.
going to do
Thank
today.
you. Okay, so if you will, each one when you first speak, if you can just introduce yourself for the record and remind us what school or district you're coming from.
Well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Cashel Higgins. I'm a legislative intern here. You've probably seen me sitting in various chairs. I'm a student board rep for the Harwood Union Unified School District, and I'm a member of the Youth Policy Advisory Committee for the Agency of Education.
Hi, everyone. Oh, go ahead. Am I good? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Zoe Epstein. I'm a junior at Champlain Valley Union High School, and I'm also a student rep on the school board. And we're really grateful that we have the opportunity to be here today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Gracie Morris, and I am a board representative on the South Burlington School District School Board.
And I forgot to mention I am a junior. So we're going to start with Zoe reading a little statement that we put together, and then we're each going to be sharing why we're here and what we value and how we think really students should be involved in the decision making that will come soon. All right, Gracie. Zoe.
Okay. So we have crafted a bit of a mission statement and all the work that we are doing. So I'm going to read that to you. Students are at the heart of education, yet their voices are often left out of the decisions that shape their learning. We believe that students deserve a seat at the table, where policies shape their, where policies, curriculum, and school experience.
Pause for just a second. So Gracie, if you maybe mute when you're not, are you?
She is.
Oh, you are muted. Okay. Sometimes that. We don't have great internet often in CVSD. Sorry, we're getting just a little bit of feedback, but let's try it again.
So if you have anything maybe hitting your mic or your computer.
I'm guessing it's a connectivity issue from where
yes,
you're
I'm guessing the same. Can you hear me any better?
We can hear you. There's a little bit of feedback.
We'll be okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Do you want me to restart?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Students are at the heart of education, yet their voices are often left out of the decisions that shape their learning. We believe that students deserve a seat at the table, where policies, curriculum, and school experiences are designed with them, not just for them. By fostering collaboration between students, educators, and administrators and decision makers, we can create an education system that is more inclusive, effective, and empowering for all. Gracie, go ahead.
Great. Now we are going to talk a little bit about the value of our experience on our board. So I will go first. As I said, my name is Gracie Morris. I serve on the South Burlington School District Board, and this is my second year serving on the school board, and I'm going to tell you a bit about why I think promoting student perspectives and the education funding process is so valuable. So the past 2 years, undoubtedly, have been a difficult time to be a student representative given the current fiscal crisis that we find ourselves in. For both FY25 and FY26 budgets, South Burlington had to make critical decisions regarding staffing and programming cuts. In my school, during these budget seasons, there was a feeling, shared by students and staff alike, of anxiety, distress, and confusion. As a student representative, my task is to bring both the voice of the student body to board meetings and to relay information from board meetings back to students. In order to do this during budget seasons, my co-representative and I presented to high school students about education funding and specific proposed school budget cuts. Afterwards, we had complex conversations with a diverse group of students about beloved classes, programs, sports teams, and extracurriculars. Then, with our knowledge of the current fiscal climate, my fellow student board rep and I made informed recommendations to our school board. Not only does having student representatives allow for school board members to make informed decisions, but our role has proven to be impactful when communicating with community members as well. Last year, our school budget failed twice before finally passing on a third vote, and one of the main differences in the third proposed budget, besides a lower tax rate, was the student support behind it. In anticipation of the vote, my co-student rep and I set up a voter registration table for students and were interviewed by local news channels to spread our message publicly. We also wrote an article for our local newspaper explaining why the budget needed to be passed and helped other students in our school to do the same. And finally, South Burlington High School students engaged in a school-wide walkout, which I believe to be one of the primary factors that allowed our budget to pass. This goes to show that students are powerful in reminding taxpayers why a quality public education matters. In a time when education funding is often talked about in terms of dollar amounts, I see it as crucial to amplify student voice at powerful tables. In some proposed education bills we've seen, school boards seem to have the potential to become hyper-politicized due to their paid positions and small size. Including student representatives on these boards would be a crucial check on power. By allowing student perspectives to be amplified at these tables, the state will ensure that major decisions by both board members and taxpayers are being made with the experience and success of students in mind.
Great, thank you. Can I just ask a clarifying question, a reminder? So you're all representatives on your school boards. You are not voting members, is that right? Like you're sort of full representational, but you don't actually, when they vote, you're not actually able to vote.
On my school, but actually,
Correct. I don't.
Okay.
we raise our hands and say yes or no, and then they take it into account, but it's not
doesn't.
actually weighted.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. You're sort of like DC in Congress. All right, let's hope the internet is going to be
Cashel,
happier in Heinsberg now. Let's see.
Yes. Cashel, do you want to go next?
In the order I think you were next.
Oh, okay.
All right, so as I said, my name is Zoe Epstein, and this is my second year serving as a student representative on the Champlain Valley Union School District School Board. During my first year on the school board, I took a backseat in my role. As the youngest of 3 representatives, I wanted to listen, learn, and ensure I fully understood the complexities of school governance before contributing my own thoughts and opinions. This year, I've been determined to be more actively involved and find meaningful ways to amplify student voice. After attending our first budget information meeting in December, I was struck by the absence of student perspectives in decision-making. What stood out even more was the district's communication plan. Despite its detailed strategies for community engagement, there was no mention of student outreach. I knew something needed to change. To address this, I collaborated closely with our superintendent and communications manager, along with a small group of students. Together, we created a presentation explaining the complexities of our district's of the General Education Fund, the impact of property taxes and the common level of appraisal, and the effects of Act 60 and Act 127 on statewide education funding. We also examined the specific budget reductions facing Champlain Valley Union High School and explored how those cuts would impact student daily lives. We delivered the presentation to all 9th and 12th grade students, as well as several 10th and 11th graders. Their reactions ranged from fear and confusion to disbelief and curiosity. Witnessing those responses underscored how vital it is for students to understand the financial decisions shaping their education, and for their voices to be a part of those conversations. To capture these perspectives, we created a documentary featuring student testimonies. They shared their thoughts, reflections, and deep appreciation for our school and the education and the opportunities it provides. A common theme emerged: confusion. Many students questioned why the system was so complex. Ninth graders expressed fear that they wouldn't have the same opportunities as those before them, and upperclassmen voiced concern for future students, worried that the remarkable programs that shaped their learning would eventually disappear. Their stories highlighted the profound impact these decisions have on our school community and making it clear why student voices must be heard. When I first read the governor's original proposal and the entirety of the H.454 bill, I was shocked by the profound lack of student voice in the decision-making process. These policies would directly impact students and their educational experiences, yet the perspectives of those most affected were entirely absent. It was a stark reminder of how often young people are left out of the conversations about their own education. The changes my fellow students and I have been able to make through my platform on the school board wouldn't have been possible without the existence of the student representative role. Serving in this capacity has given me the opportunity to advocate for my peers, ensuring their concerns and insights are heard by district leaders. It is a role that's empowered me to bridge the gap between students and policymakers, something I now recognize is essential for creating meaningful and equitable change. This experience has shown me the immense value of having student voices represented at the decision-making table. Student representatives offer a firsthand perspective on how policies and budgets impact learning environments, extracurricular opportunities, and overall school culture. Without that insight, boards risk making decisions that fail to address the actual needs of students. Maintaining student representation on school boards is not just beneficial, it's essential for building an education system that genuinely serves its students. Moreover, it's crucial that school boards remain balanced and collaborative, rather than becoming hyper-politicized or dominated by a few powerful voices. When boards are small or politically driven, the risk of student perspectives being disregarded grows even higher. Student representation brings accountability and reminds board members of the human impact behind every decision. Moving forward, I'm committed to advocating for the continued presence of student members on school boards. Our experience and insights matter, and the meaningful change we've created in my district proves just how impactful student voices can be. A truly representative school board, one that listens, collaborates, and values student input, is the key to ensuring our education system reflects the needs and the aspirations of all its students. Go ahead, Cashel.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Transforming education will affect students more directly than any other group of people in Vermont. And they deserve a say in the future of public education, not only because their entire lived experiences are defined by it, but also because they know it best. But I've been thinking about things with a broader scope recently. As a member of my school board, I've been able to interact deeply with Vermont's public education system. And through that interaction and learning, I've really grown to care and value what we've built here. And I know that's not true for many thousands of students across Vermont. And with this sense of transformation and this movement towards a new system, I see an opportunity. And I see the opportunity to embed students in this process and allow them to interact with and learn from and value education the same way I have. And right now in this country, I think we're seeing the effects of the widespread distrust of institutions. One of the most important things that can be instilled early on in someone's life is the value of our public institutions. And by including students in this movement towards transformation, you're instilling the value of our public institutions in the next generation of Vermonters. You're encouraging them to always work towards a better future and not to trust institutions blindly, but to trust the promise of institutions and the benefits they bring, even when there's room for improvement.
Excellent, thank you so much. That's all of your prepared testimony, right? You're available for a few questions, or am I missing out on?
Yes, please, questions.
Okay. Oh wait, Zoe, go ahead.
Yes. We do have one, we were gonna answer the one other question that you had asked of us,
Okay.
but we're happy to skip that one if you'd like.
Let's see if committee, just so we have time, because we also have to have some committee discussion. If committee members have questions, and then we'll circle back to it as time allows.
Okay, sounds good.
No question, but just a comment, as I've been sort of swimming in what we're doing, I just really appreciate you coming here and reminding us about some very important parts of what we're doing, and I think we need to remember to keep student voice right up there as we kind of come up with a system that frankly will make that probably a little more challenging as we go to bigger districts and smaller boards. And we need to find a way to keep it alive and keep it vibrant and keep it strongly part of the system.
Other questions for the students? Though I would point out, Zoe's coming from a system that's at about 4,000 students, sort of one of the kind of ideals we talk about in a future state, and it is alive and well, so I think it's certainly possible. Obviously, that's the biggest example we have in Vermont, but we can become a bit bigger and still be pretty deeply, authentically listening to student voice. I had a small question for you.
Despite having terrible internet at your.
Right, yes, Cashel. Is your internship here flexible pathways? Like, is it a flexible pathways op through your school, the way your independent study through flexible pathways? Just again, as we think about all of the things we create here and then what that means on the ground, just in terms of how you structured your internship here as a high school student.
Yeah, so that's what it turned into,
Okay.
but initially it was just me reaching out.
Yeah.
But what is your internship here?
I'm a legislative intern with Thomas Stevens from Waterbury.
Perfect.
You want to share with everyone the sort of second question I posed to you, and then go ahead and offer your feedback on that?
Yeah, so you asked us, the first question was to kind of share our individual opinions, and then the second question was just to remind us of the importance of authentic student voice. Do you want me to answer that one?
Take it away.
All right. Through this process, I've learned a simple but powerful truth. Students care deeply when they're given the knowledge and the platform to contribute. Time and time again, I've witnessed how informed and empowered students become when they understand the decisions that impact their education. When students see how policies and budgets shape their experiences, they don't respond with apathy. They respond with passion, insight, and genuine desire to create positive change. But the opportunity to engage doesn't happen by chance. It happens when students are intentionally invited into conversations, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a meaningful contributor. Student voice is not just a checkbox on a stakeholder list. It's an essential perspective that brings relevance and accountability to decisions that shape our schools. Without it, we risk making choices in a vacuum, detached from the realities of the very people those decisions affect. In my role as a student representative, I've seen firsthand how impactful authentic student input can be. By collaborating with district leaders, developing presentations, and facilitating discussions, I've worked to ensure that students are not only informed about budget decisions, but are empowered to make their voices and their perspectives heard. The responses from my peers, their curiosity, their concern, and their desire to understand the complexities of school funding reaffirm the importance of this work. Students care. They want to be a part of the process. They just need the chance. I challenge you as changemakers and leaders in our community to reflect on this. How can we ensure that students play a more active role in shaping the decisions that impact them? Not just as advisors, but as essential voices in the process, where their ideas are not only heard, but valued and acted upon. This means recognizing student perspectives as credible and necessary, creating intentional opportunities for dialogue, and fostering a culture where young people feel empowered to question, contribute, and advocate for their peers. True progress begins when student voices are not just included, but embedded into the foundation of decision-making. It happens when we move beyond performative listening and commit to a collaborative leadership. It means viewing students not as passive recipients of policies, but as active participants in creating the educational experiences they deserve. Because when students are a part of the process, the result is stronger, more inclusive, and one where every decision reflects the shared values and the aspirations of those it serves.
Great, thank you. And if one of you could email, it looks like you have things pretty well organized and prepared there. If you can email your testimony to Annie, then she can post it and everyone has copies of it. And it would be wonderful for us to be able to come back to it. Yeah.
One of you, it may have been you, Cashel, who said you're on the AOE's youth.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about what that is and what it does and how often it meets, that sort of stuff?
So far we've met once. And this was really an opportunity through Up for Learning, which is a statewide youth group. They bring together the students who are able to advocate for themselves and put them together. So the AOE used that resource, and I'm involved with that group, so that's why I was contacted. I think we'll be affecting language soon of the actual legislation, but right now we just got a run through by Jill Briggs Campbell, the Deputy Secretary. I'm not sure when our next meeting is.
How many students are on the, what is it? Give us the name of it again.
The Youth Policy Advisory Council.
Got it.
I'd say under 10 students.
Okay. From across the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Other questions or thoughts from the committee?
Gracie, did you want to share that last thing? Either the Harkness thing or the FTE part we talked about?
Sure. So when we were meeting as students trying to figure out what we wanted to bring to you today, we did have some ideas of how student voice could be more incorporated in the policy drafting process. And then also how students can play a more active role in bettering other districts if districts become consolidated. And so I prepared a little something to read that applies to all three of our schools, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So in many proposed education bills that we've seen, the idea of making education standards more equitable and consistent between districts has come up time and time again. Students have the potential to play a vital role in expanding access and promoting opportunities to their neighboring districts and therefore increasing the quality and equitability of our public schools. A fitting example of this involved the implementation of a student-centered discussion-based teaching approach called Harkness. Historically, Harkness has been used primarily in private schools to teach both students how to converse effectively and engage deeper in their learning. In 2016, Harwood Union High School began to implement Harkness into their class curriculum. This curriculum begins by teaching 9th grade students soft skills and then progresses into full class discussions about various topics. From there, students continue their high school classes practicing this conversation method, and by graduation, students are able to apply these skills to conversations surrounding difficult topics. After Harwood began implementing this discussion practice into their curriculum, CVU has followed suit and also offers Harkness teaching in many classes. This fall, a student group that I'm part of at South Burlington caught wind of this teaching style and has since been advocating for it to be implemented into curriculum at South Burlington. Last month, our group was welcomed into CVU and observed one Harkness discussion and participated in another. Now, in a few weeks, we'll be presenting to the entire SBHS teaching staff during a professional development day. I lost. Where are we? So we'll be presenting to the entire teaching staff during a professional development day about the Harkness pedagogy. Following this presentation, teachers will have the opportunity to speak with CVU students and teachers about their experience with Harkness. In Vermont, we are lucky that great opportunities such as Harkness are already abundant in many of our public schools. When we talk about setting consistent education standards, we have the opportunity to share these initiatives with other districts, which would directly uplift all students, both by providing new opportunities for some or empowering others with leadership roles when sharing about these programs.
Thank you. That's a really thoughtful, interesting kind of real-world application of what some more consistency and opportunities might afford. And it has been interesting to see the kind of organic progression and movement of Harkness as a methodology and more student discussion in the classroom in Vermont. But perhaps a more streamlined system will allow that to be a little bit more cohesive around the state and maybe more implemented more quickly. So that was an awesome real-world.
Something that should be implemented in the legislature?
We probably Harkness too much.
Pretty much all
Or we could probably go back to some of the soft skills training parts of the beginning of Harkness. We might need to start there. We jump right to the discussion of hard stuff and maybe need to work on the soft skills pieces of it, but yes.
I love Harkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any final questions or thoughts? Thank you. It's a breath of fresh
Thanks so
air to
much.
hear students caring so much, taking time. You all just did this extra on your own, not as any of your official roles, truly caring and engaging. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, committee, let's do 5 minutes and come right back. We are back at House Education Friday, March 21st, 2025. This is further committee discussion time as we try to put some bows on some parts of our work to say, okay, this is done for now, and move on to the next topic. I think there are a couple of small things that have been brought up that I'd like to go over at some point. But I think we're still on class size minimum discussion. At 3 o'clock, we have the secretary coming in to answer some questions about the $4 million budget ask, and not just like specifics about that, but really how it fits into the long-range planning and the long-range work coming up ahead. Just for interest's sake, this just came out yesterday in the Addison County Independent, and just to sort of talk about the impact of class size minimums. So this is, they created a class size minimum policy a few weeks ago in order to address declining enrollment at the schools in the district, Ripton being one of them. And they basically put class size minimums at 10 or 11, 10 I think, in the elementary school grades. And so they, that really made the K1 classroom, they weren't even, as they had 3. So they have to come up with a way to reassign to another elementary school. But the ripple effect is just kind of interesting. So I'm just going to read a bit of this to you. It's really just to sort of show class size minimum policies in action. The policy allows the superintendent to reassign students in unenrolled classes as a group to a different school. Superintendent has reassigned those 3 children to the Salisbury Community School. Ripton boosters are hopeful the building could still serve children in grades 2 through 5, 6 and up go to the middle school and high school, for the next academic year. The grade 2-3 class and the grade 4-5 class are both forecast to have 11 students next year, so right on the edge. So they also put out a kind of a survey for folks. An unspecified number of Ripton households with children in the school's upper grades have said they want their students to attend a different ACSD school next year, based in part on concerns of the school's ongoing instability and or the desire to keep siblings together in one school. District officials declined to share the specific numbers because they're so small that individual kids can be identified. But a couple of the households spoke at a meeting Monday about the torturous decision to do what they believed was best for the educational, social, and emotional well-being of their children, while knowing that their kids' exit from the school could expedite the school's downfall. One woman with a 4th grader at the school and a 4-year-old daughter attending preschool in Middlebury. I'm struggling with what's in front of you because, much like you, ever since we've had kids at Ripton, it's always been wondering if they'd make it all the way through, acknowledging the angst of seeing the 6th grade moving to the middle school and the end of a pre-K program due to low enrollment. We're in a situation where there'll be no kindergarten or 1st grade, so what does that mean for my daughter who's now in preschool, she asked. She works in Middlebury where her 2 older children attend school. She praised the school for the way it served her son, but she now believes he might flourish in a bigger classroom setting. I don't want to seem like the mom who just gave up on Ripton School. Another mom with 2 students at the school said if the school stays afloat, her kids would be in these small, like 11-student multi-age classrooms. It's not working for my children. The decision has already been made that we won't be attending Ripton. I have a choice to keep my children together, and why wouldn't I do that? Because the different grades. So there's just some more here, and they happen to mention that that there's bipartisan support for minimum class sizes of 15, which would not only make things tougher for Ripton, but for other elementary schools in the district and statewide, the superintendent noted. Anyway, I really just share all of that with you just to say, whether it's 15 or 16 or whatever, this class size minimums in rural areas can make a big deal. Yeah.
So I thought of this yesterday too, so just throw this monkey wrench in the conversation. The difference between grade sizes and class sizes is different, grade bands.
Yeah.
Because
classroom.
like you said, you have classes of multi-age classes.
Right.
Or like high school, are they classes, or do you mean the freshman class? And so there's a nuance between how many kids in a grade and how many kids in a class also.
Except in all of the rural schools, they're
Yeah.
one and the same.
Well, not one and the same. A grade band is different than a multi-age classroom.
Oh, yes, I understand
You're
that,
saying-
when they talk about classes and
Yeah.
grades.
Oh, yeah.
Since there's
Yeah.
only one of each. it's the
Right.
same, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, how about somebody talk about where we left off and where we need to go?
I have something to say.
Yes.
Okay, so Casey, I was thinking about your children yesterday, driving back and forth to the gym, and I was thinking about what you said.
Is that
And
on record?
I've been wondering what my purpose is here, and I realized yesterday, here's my purpose. As I was thinking about classroom size, and I was thinking about what I used to do as an English teacher, and I used to make sure that the kids were reading and writing a lot. These things take time to correct, right? And I kind of, this is just piggybacking on what I said yesterday. The thing is, 18, 20, 23 kids in a class, that's fine. I was listening to some of those averages, and I know there are places in this country, New York City, Iowa, where there's 35 or 40 kids in a classroom. And I can tell you how many papers those kids write. Zeros. Because there's no human way to do a quality job and do what you know you need to do in your heart, right? To give kids important feedback on what they're doing. And so that I could sit down with you and you could say, what did I get to see? And, of course I'm going to joke and say, because I like you. But then I'm going to say, okay, thank you. I was a cheap one. But then say, okay, look, your thesis is weak here. I love what you're doing in this paragraph. But this doesn't develop. Right? So like we can have that one-on-one, we can talk. But I guess what I want to say is like, we have an opportunity here to make a difference. But what we don't want to do is create a situation where we've mandated that classes are so big that kids lose, right? Because I want your kids in class, and I want to do a great job for those kids, right? If we're too small, it's hard to do a great job. If you're too big, on the other hand, then you can't do a good job there either, right? So I wanted to just throw a little bit more teacher perspective there, because I know that economically, what we're doing, we have to do something important, right? Like, we just need to tread carefully on that, because teachers want to do a good job for your kids, right? They want to make a difference, they want to make an impact. So, there's another 2 cents, or before.
I thought you were,
Anyway, no.
I thought you were English teacher, not a math teacher.
Right, I know. Did I get this, was this incorrect?
Are we just harnessing?
She wasn't listening.
If we're harnessing, I stopped listening.
Yeah,
And if you just draw lines and see who talks.
that was all just class size, let's just
Not too small,
Let's
not
just
too
be
big.
careful, right?
Yeah.
That's all.
I can't find the numbers that we were discussing.
I have them.
Okay.
It was 18, 20, and 22.
Nice try.
You were shaking your head.
I think it went down for anything.
I think we left off with, we had a lot of discussion about sort of the VSA numbers period, the VSA numbers, APA numbers, some disagreement on some of them. So from my perspective, we need to arrive at agreement, or as close as we're going to get to agreement on the numbers, and then we can delve into the whole exception parts of
Yeah.
like, what if it's tech ed, what if it's driver's ed, that stuff. But so we were at kindergarten was 12. These are the VSA numbers. Kindergarten 12, 1 through 5, 15, 6 through 12, 18. But again, those are the VSA numbers.
We talked about a number of concepts. We had a layering concept put on the table. We had, or maybe even a phasing concept. Mine was more of a check back concept, and then just straight like fight it out over the numbers concept.
Well, and I'll also add that for a lot of the rural schools, 18 kids in a classroom.
So I
Go for it, sorry.
She had her hand up
Leanne
first.
was next.
I just want to share an email that I got from a constituent yesterday afternoon who was watching us online. And he was pointing out to me, he's a school board member, that at his school, which is one of the schools that is unlikely to ever meet that number, the scores are high in most of the classes. That the scores show that the kids are in fact learning within this small school setting. I think like one of our biggest points is that, you know, by making it a little bit bigger, we actually can offer the kids more and they can be successful, and that is a value that I mostly share. But he's wondering, and I think this is worth bringing up, what if you're meeting like 3 out of the 4 quality education standards and the one that you're not meeting is numbers because you're a rural area, but you're showing that you are in fact a successful school. And I just want to make sure that there's a place for that we're considering.
Okay, so once we kind
Okay.
of hone in on numbers, we'll talk about those situations.
Okay.
Yeah, and don't let us forget.
I won't.
She won't.
I won't.
We won't.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Right.
So
You're next.
to go back to I keep hearing like the small schools aren't going to get there, and I don't disagree. But we've also talked about, even in the original governor's proposal, 454, we talk about there are going to be carve-outs, there are going to be places where we're going to have to make those exceptions for those schools until something, either in perpetuity or until something can be figured out where there can be this something put in that area that can align to those numbers. So you can still use the larger numbers and have the variance, as I called it, available to those schools until there's a viable option for either of them to meet those numbers, another school becomes available, or it just stays that way because that's just how it is in a chunk of the Northeast Kingdom that has nothing. Right, I don't know, like I still think you can still use the larger numbers that'll apply to a large portion of the state, and then those areas that it won't apply to, you can figure that out.
If we go much higher than the VSA numbers, I'm not saying that we hold firm on those, that's open for discussion. The number of schools who will have to line up for that variance is going to be very large.
I don't know if this is possible, but is there a way to consider it in a percentage way? Like if you're from a much less densely populated area, what percentage of less populated are you, and have those numbers adjusted so that like it's appropriate to the scope of your size? Is that making any sense? I'm not really math person.
To me, that falls in the variance category.
Okay.
You go to the state board and
Okay.
say, you know, we can't possibly meet this because look at where we are and the population around us. I think what you're saying may apply in a way when we start talking about like school size, to say that the school itself should be representative of the population that is around it.
Yeah, okay.
So that we say a school size minimum of 450 in an area with, in an entire county where there are 350 kids, it's not gonna quite work.
I mean, I think we need to honor that we also have a large population of our, or a small, I guess it's smaller than the large population of our state that is choosing to go live in the woods and is, you know, this is the culture that they want. So.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna throw some numbers out, and these aren't willy-nilly numbers, these come from some of the testimony that we've had. Our homework that was reassigned, and Gordon Narrows, she gives a outline of a bunch of studies and some ranges in there, and what all of them say. The K through 12, I think, or the K class, 12, I think is a great number. I think that works well. But then I was thinking the 1 to 3 for 15, and then 4 through 8, 18, and then anything 9 through 12 is 20. And I took those by looking at that testimony and some of the other testimony we've talked about, and trying to come up with some compromising of size, and because the 25 was,
Can you read those
was
again?
high.
Yeah, can you say those again?
K was 12, 1 through 3 was 15, 4 through 8 was 18, and 9 through 12 was 20. Yeah, those are not willy-nilly numbers.
VSA was 12, 15, 18, so not broken out into 4 bands, but
Correct.
3. Yes,
And
Beth?
for me, I'm a little more comfortable with that because when the higher numbers were being talked about, for 6 through 12, there's a big difference between a 6th grader and a 12th grader. So having 9 through 12 banded separately than 4 through 8, and I like the 4 bands better than the 3. Just because of developmental reasons for children.
Thinking on my feet, so I'm not sure if I thought this through fully. I wonder if this would, if there could be that would create some additional challenge, particularly in
Probably
small
would.
schools, where likely you're still gonna have some multi-age, the 2-year bands
Yeah.
that are probably up through grade 6, where you might be doing a 5-6, you might be
Right.
doing a
A
3-4,
3-4,
and so if we
yeah.
parse those out, does it remove some of the flexibility you might need around a 2-year multi-age classroom by busting those apart? I think up to about 6, grade 6 would be my,
So would you say, like 1 to 6, 15? Not necessarily these numbers, but break it
Yeah.
out, kindergarten,
1
1 to 6, 7, 8, 9, 12? Or would you go 7, 12?
I wonder 7-8 feels so small, like.
I know, that's
I'm
why-
more like 7-12, just because it feels like we're creating a logistical nightmare for on the ground.
Right.
Like, to me, if I worry the more specific we get at smaller grade bands, the more we tie people's
Yeah, I
hands
would
for
agree.
a lot of the flexibility that's gonna be needed.
Or 1 to 4 in 5 days,
So if you did
in chunks of 4.
6.
Beth?
Yeah, maybe in chunks of 4. You know, if it was 1 to 4, 15, or whatever number we come up, and then 5 to 8, because a lot of schools structure by 5 to 8, it gives you pairs of grades. And then you've got 4 grades, 4 grades, 4 grades.
But you could even put verbiage in that says, in mixed grade classes, class size would be based on the average of the amount of children from each grade within that class. So, right, like if you have, let's say it's equal, right? You have if you 15 and 18, right? That's
Yeah.
so you just put verbiage in there that covers that and then that covers anything. Right? It covers any mixed grade classroom, even through middle school to high school, without having to
So-
set on a different band.
What do people think about 1 to 4, 15, 5 to 8, 18, 9 to 12, 20?
I think I like that
Say that again, 1 to
slightly
4,
better. Just
15?
because
12,
it's in pairs.
1 to 4, 15, 5 to 8, 18, 9 to 12, 20. And then we're gonna talk about what happens if you can't do it.
Right. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that for this
I'm
portion
okay
of
with
the
that.
conversation. I just have a question, and I'm sorry if this throws a monkey wrench. I feel like I apologize. for
This is,
Don't
yeah,
stop
no, yeah,
apologizing.
you are now banned from saying.
All right.
Yeah, no more.
So there might be a better time to ask this, and maybe we also have not made this decision yet, but what I'm wondering is this gonna also apply to any, private, institutions that we send public funds to for either elementary or high school? Because one of the things I'm really struggling with is that we would tell a public institution that they need to close because they didn't meet this education quality standard, and then send that same money to a school that also doesn't meet it, that's private. So like, is this going to apply to, if you're getting public funds, you have to meet this?
That'll be a discussion.
Yeah, okay, so we have no stance on that yet?
No,
We're not
No.
we're not
Okay.
having a discussion.
But it's an important-
All right. Yeah.
it does.
Independent schools.
It does say that.
Right,
Yeah.
so, I mean,
It
so.
says it.
The governor's one does,
I would,
but,
yeah, I would have
It's a
the same
struggle.
concerns, I appreciate you
Yeah.
raising it.
okay.
Because we
So
could
maybe
create a
just
perverse
check that out.
incentive.
Yeah,
Right.
right, like, oh, I'm rich enough to all just send my kids to
I-
a different
yeah.
private
I
school.
don't wanna lose our enthusiasm.
For numbers.
Let's see if we can put a pin in something. We can agree.
Okay, everybody comfortable?
Mike Morgan, yeah.
So remind us what we're comfortable with.
We are now comfortable
We could write
with
15,
6,
19, 20.
restate it.
kindergarten 12, 1 to 4, 15, 5 to 8, 18, 9 to 12, 20. Yes.
Don't blow it up.
I'm not. in case you already gave me the look. Just kidding. So, okay, so I'm trying to think, right? There was a conversation, I think it was yesterday, we talked about where does middle school start and end. And some middle schools start in 5th grade, which is really weird to me. And some start in 7th. Could this be a place where we also make that decision, right? So going to Coors Elementary and then
Just because,
I don't know, it's more
I just don't think we
There's
can
different
define middle
philosophy in
school,
different
I
places,
think-
yeah.
because everybody's doing it
If we're trying
differently.
to more standardize things over time, does it become something that
I
gets
don't
know.
layered in even?
I would say no as a teacher, because it depends on the numbers
I
and.
just thought it might be an
Yeah.
easy way to have that conversation.
Is it ours, where I taught, because some years I taught 7-8, some years it was 6-7-8, some years it was 5-7-8. Your middle school was determined by the factors on the ground at the time. You know, what
And
the
let's
students,
not talk about teacher
the
relationship.
numbers,
Yeah.
you know.
Twisted up.
So what we called our middle school every year, not every year, but would change over time based on things that were happening on the ground.
I'm
And I
saying-
think that happens in a lot of schools.
But wouldn't like the long-term outcome of this be kind of trying to more standardize the grade levels within elementary, middle, and high school over time?
It might be, yeah.
Okay, I think probably the next topic then is what happens if you can't meet it? So the concept that's out there that we're sort of talking about is making this statute and part of educational quality standards. Educational quality standards, if you don't meet them, it generally is something that the state board deals with. Concept we have been sort of floating is if you don't meet class size minimums for 2 years, and the way, every year superintendents have to basically fill out an attestation sheet that says whether they meet EQS or whatever. So that would be the reporting method. But that you have the opportunity to go before the state board and talk about why it is challenging, and that's the time when you could say, we don't want to mess with a good thing, we have we are getting, you know, we can set some parameters that the state board takes into account, cost effectiveness, geographic isolation, all of that. We could frankly let them develop those rules probably,
It's true.
rather than us. Yes.
Is, when I think about like a phrase like education quality standards, I mean, I can see the connection between the right size and how that's an education quality standard. Cost effectiveness, I have a little bit more trouble with. That seems like a tax quality standard.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah. I was just throwing it out there,
Okay.
as language we could develop.
Yeah.
Unless we wanted to leave it to the state board to come up with the rules
Right.
around this.
I mean, I would like to see a situation in which, so I'm just like, maybe throw the phrase. you used.
Achievement or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Throw that out, but like, I would like it to be really heavily considered if a school is not meeting the minimum classroom, but can show that nonetheless their kids are all scoring really high and getting a great education.
Yeah, we'll either make it less vague than that.
Right.
But yeah, appreciate that.
I would like to be less vague than that too.
I mean, we don't want to be super less vague, we could say the state board shall take into account
Mm-hmm.
student achievement,
Geographic location.
geographic isolation,
Yeah.
and then, you know, I don't want to say cost effectiveness, but cost per pupil.
I feel like there needs to be one more thing, the geographic isolation is weighing on me a little bit too, because we have 2 different types of rural places. One that are completely geographically isolated, and one that are just rural, and like people wanna have the rural communities, but yeah, they're 20 miles from a bigger town, but
Maybe that gets into the bigger discussion of small by choice and small by
Yeah.
necessity.
But maybe there is still some value for Vermont choice to remain small towns. And, you know, I don't wanna completely override that value, that's just a different set of values.
Yeah.
So just to
Beth?
stay specific again.
Yep.
So, if I heard you right, so I guess our decision now that we need to agree on is either we're gonna write
Parameters.
in statute exactly what this means, or leave it up to the state board to make that decision, or 3, state board with some guidance from us.
So
Those are our
let
options.
me first of all back up about just the concept of starting off with it in statute, putting it in EQS, sort of a 2-year glide path to get there before we start talking about state board's role and putting parameters on that. So does that sound, is that a comfortable concept for everybody?
Is that 2-year glide path the same that the VSA, wasn't theirs 2026?
Oh, no, this is to get the standards in place.
Into it.
Yeah, get them into the books in 2026. I don't think they said anything about like how you enforce it.
If you don't
I
meet it.
think the glide path might be a little bit of your brainchild. I think they do.
Oh, the
EQS in
2-year,
general has a
2-year
two-year.
thing
Yeah.
was
That's an
absolutely
EQS.
Yeah,
my
they're
brainchild.
on a 1 year.
Yeah, they're on a 1-year.
I want to be
Just-
consistent with how all of EQS works. If it's a 2-year, you don't make it for 2 years, then it shouldn't be
EQS is
inconsistent.
mostly curricular, or,
Yeah. Goals.
Goals and standards,
Okay.
yeah, not. Yes,
Oh,
Jana?
I was just gonna say,
I did just invent the 2-year.
well, no, I
I
think I'm on board with the 2-year concept just because in some of these, smaller school communities, based on, population inflow and outflow, I mean, things could
Yeah.
change and the numbers could
Yeah.
sort of shift around. So it feels like some kind of an average over some space of time just enhances like a little bit of predictability around how these decisions kind of play out.
Or if you miss it, 2 years, but you're missing it because you know that incoming class is 20.
Right.
It allows you to sort of not have to make, higher fire. I think that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
Yeah. Like the
So I'm
bubbles.
gonna go back to advocating for my 2-year rolling average, but whatever you want to put it.
I had another quick question. I'm thinking about certain classes in any big school
Yeah.
where there aren't gonna be 20 kids, like say you get a remedial section.
We're gonna come back to that.
Okay,
Next
okay,
batch
good.
short.
I thought of that, I was thinking of that yesterday, and I just wanted to.
And I think we got
Bubbled
some
up.
VSA language on that in
About
terms of
MTSS.
MTSS, and then we have to talk about the high school electives,
Yeah, or like even like.
which I don't know what the
high end and low-
terminology is.
High end and low end,
Okay, we're gonna go to
and
the
sometimes have a
Okay.
variety.
I
Big disagreement here, I think.
really disagree with the 2-year glide path. I
Are you
think
just gonna sit back and enjoy it, are you?
I think the reality is just there's going to be a 2 plus how many year glide path. It's
Anyway,
there's
just to make it put
there's,
all in place.
There are hopefully going to be more eyes on and sort of attention to how well are we doing in these things and technical support or hard support and hard decisions if we're not. There isn't like an EQS police that's going to just go start locking doors, but I'm a little concerned about
I can.
watering down things that educators have said.
Yeah, and I think the sort of.
And not to say that it's easy.
But I think you're absolutely right. The bureaucratic steps involved.
Is going to create a glide path, yeah.
I'm not talking about a 2-year path to having these standards come into being, but we're talking about the period of time that we sort of look at in terms of enforcement, right?
Yes, and I think the argument being made, contrary to what I said, is that the sort of gotta go before the state board thinks about it, state board says something about it, is probably a 1-year process anyway.
I think one of the powerful things, but if this is about some big hard goals and one of them is also efficiency and affordability, is that going into effect in 2026 is a really strong signal to the field about their budgeting and planning purposes for FY27. And we are always so far behind the information they need at the schedule if we do budget schedules, and so it's that really clear, it's happening, so you're ripped an article, it's already from all of our conversations it's happening in the field, but those really clear signals, the further out a school can plan for and budget for, is going to set them up for as much success as possible.
Just doing a quick search to have on the ground information. So both New York and Massachusetts use have a waiver program for these such situations where they don't meet the minimums or maximums, and they basically submit a proposal to say why it is this way and how it will benefit them. And from what it looks like, most of them are usually approved, unless it's really outside of some kind of crazy guideline. So I mean, there's 2 bordering states with us that do it that way.
Have a waiver process.
Right, and then it seems like that's the way they go.
There's the super sticky wicket in this, and I'm the mean lady from the giant district again. We have a statewide education fund, and the other states don't. And
Right.
so the choices everyone makes impact everyone. And so that's why, rural by necessity versus rural by choice matters. The amount of, things that my school offers and chooses to invest in matters most to that school, but it matters to all of us, all of our decisions, and we're still gonna have a statewide education fund under a foundation formula, the best I understand that finance shift.
Yeah.
And so that's why, as much as I wish, I don't know if I wish, there's a good reason behind, and it doesn't matter, the courts have decided we have a statewide education fund, and so that's why these things are more linked than.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we actually need to discuss this any further. I'm since I was advocating for this sort of 2-year thing, I am comfortable with what you've said. I'm comfortable with the slow pace of bureaucracy when it comes to doing this work.
So are we back to the July 1st, 2026?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yep.
Implemented as of 26
Yep.
for the
And that's in
26,
keeping with the
27
VSA
school year.
recommendation.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And so now we are talking waiver process.
Who does it apply to your point?
Can
And waiver process, where are the exceptions? Yeah. Waiver process and exception, I guess 3 different big things, because exceptions,
Right.
it doesn't apply to driver's ed, because you can't put 20 kids in a car.
Well, let's do the easy one. Let's do exceptions.
Exception.
That's easy.
I think the others are gonna get harder.
So I'd say, and, there's some good language in the VSA about MTSS, which I think is, kind of a no-brainer. That's been a priority of the state all along.
Yeah, there's specific proposals, intervention services pursuant to Act 173 and MTSS are excluded from minimums. Now, I think we also have the Montpelier example where they have fleshed this out quite a bit more. And it feels like the subtext of some of the testimony we've gotten is they've used it to try to steer towards some hard decisions that have some educational reasoning and efficiency behind them. There's some specifics around what's excluded from. These are guidelines, we might want to think about it a little bit differently, but they have some specific exclusions, like CTE, special ed, flexible pathways, supports for ELLs, driver's ed are specifically listed as. I think there's also an interesting concept here at the high school level, because minimums and maximums apply to content areas, individual classes could be smaller, so across your English department, your average needs to be, close to that 20, but you could end up having something bigger, something smaller.
Right.
There's some flexibility there,
that
because you're
makes
gonna, and it shifts in year to year what kids wanna take and what you have
Yes.
people to teach, we don't wanna kill electives.
I might,
Maybe we don't need that specific.
well, I was gonna say, I might offer an idea which would sort of maybe get us out of this, and that is, because this requires some real thought and study, make some language that sort of holds on the 9-12 minimums until the state board better defines to what classes that minimum applies. All right?
She's saying no.
That's it.
All right.
I think we
I'm
can.
good. All right.
Sorry.
So just wanted to converse more about electives, right? Because you don't want to kill the electives. But I do, I'll notice it from my own area. There are electives that over the last 4 years have had 3 kids, never
Yeah.
anymore, right? But a lot of them, you know, so while it's valuable, it like is that too small, right? Like that's
I
a
mean, there are
lot.
plenty of districts that have policies that say if there's not 7 kids,
You know,
or whatever.
and I just want, like, that's what I see, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
get it.
I
It doesn't
see
bode
it
well
too.
for me when I have the conversation, so.
This is where there's work in even our larger schools that are at scale, there
So
will be
even
some challenging
within
decisions.
the exception, there's gotta, some cases, gotta be a hard line, right? It's the exception till here, and then it's not.
Yeah. I don't fully
Hey,
understand.
I advocated for punting this to somebody else, so
Well-
now those of you who disagree with me, which is all of you.
I
need to
just
wait.
disappointed that she didn't disagree with you. I didn't say I disagreed.
This is, I'm gonna now harden this.
Well, I have a question, I guess.
Yeah, in and out, now I'm out,
Tap out.
So, but if we're talking about implementing these for the 26-27 school year, that gives us a little time to figure out the exceptions, right? Like, not
Well,
saying,
There's-
no?
And there's no.
Because they're gonna
time.
start
They gotta
budgeting this
plan,
out.
they gotta hire, they
That's
gotta, course offerings have to go out a month before kids, you know,
Let alone everything
scheduling
else
it.
we're gonna have to do.
Of course, catalog's January.
Course, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, how about putting in a few, like, I think this is where I'm gonna need help from Ledge Council, we're talking about sort of a dual path here of putting in statute so that things can take effect quickly, but ultimately if it's going to sit in EQS, those are rules, that is a state board process. So I was gonna say,
She's shaking her head.
never mind,
Saying no.
put it in, but then
Shaking it off.
the details will have to get sort of revised and edited or approved through the state board rules process. But I misunderstand, so.
No, well, would you like me to come to the table?
It's always better when you.
Yes.
Careful what you wish for. That's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. No, I did not mean to suggest that you were wrong. It is a two-part, which I don't know how you can interpret shaking my head any other way, so. EQS, Education Quality Standards, lives both in statute and rule.
Okay.
There is the Education Quality Standards Statute, 165, I believe.
Thank you.
And that was the Education Quality Standards Statute, 16 VSA 165 lays out a whole bunch of things, including the process for what happens if a school is not meeting education quality standards.
Stay consistent.
Yes. Within that statute, subdivision 3 says in order for a school to meet education quality standards, it has to substantially meet rules adopted by the state board regarding conditions, practices, and resources of schools. That's where the rules come in. So then the rules outline the standards regarding conditions, practices, and resources of schools. So you could put something in statute. You could require the state board to update its rule with guidance, or you could put something in statute and have the state board either reflect the statute or provide additional detail or guidance.
Yes, that's what I was thinking, was that last one you said.
But it doesn't have to be rule. It can be statute.
But because we are talking about using EQS as accountability instrument,
The vehicle.
we're talking about go with option 3,
Right,
right?
so it'll be in both.
So you could put,
Reflect the statute.
yeah, you could say, so for example, you could have a subdivision that says, so, here, actually, maybe it would be helpful if I shared my screen here. Would that be helpful to you?
Sure.
Making an awful lot of presumptions tonight. Is it?
Well.
It's a data and
Okay. Okay. Oop, wrong, yep. Okay. So here we have education quality standards, this is the statute. It lives in the state board chapter. So in order to carry out Vermont's policy that all children will be afforded educational opportunities that are say it with me,
Substantially
equal. Each Vermont public school, including each career technical center, shall meet the following education quality standards, right? Nothing about rules yet.
Yeah.
So we don't get to rules until subdivision 3. The school substantially meets standards adopted by the rule of the state board. So there's lots of ways we can do this. Off the cuff, you could put something in 3, right? You could add to this list. The rules have to address those standards, including school leadership, instructional practices, educational materials, access to current technology, and class size minimums. And then you can flesh out class size minimums, say like, for this grade band it shall be, for this grade band it shall be, this grade shall be, and then you could say something to the effect of, and shall be subject to the exceptions or whatever framework you want to, label you want to put on it, in state board rules. And then you can provide separate guidance in a piece of session law to the state board on what they have to take into account in their rules. That's just one way to, there's other ways, and when I have time to think about that and have more direction from you all, I can come up with a cleaner package or proposal. But there's, that's one way to get at what you are trying to do, where you are putting in the bottom line and then asking the state board to come up with all of the ins and outs that you would need in order to make it operational. And that's a legal perspective, not from the
Right,
field.
so just trying to make sure I understand the process. So would you just add an E?
You could.
That said class size minimums, but you wouldn't have to flesh it out there, but just, because those aren't fleshed out there, any of those.
We have to flesh it out someplace.
But,
Yeah.
and you would flush it out in the rules, or in statute,
Whatever you
law,
want.
guidance to the rules.
All
Because none of the
policies.
others are fleshed out there.
We would flesh it out there. as
And
well.
it doesn't
You
have
would?
Yeah.
Okay, that was my question.
It doesn't have to live in subdivision 3. You could make a whole new subdivision for class size minimums, right? That's what I'm.
Yeah, right. We would flesh it out because we've at least selected grade bands and numbers.
And you'd put that there rather than the state board rules.
Well, that is state board rules, or state board roles. So it would be both in statute and in state board rules.
Okay.
Under the state board goals.
Okay.
Leanne.
So you're saying we can amend this theoretically? So would it be possible to say the school substantially meets the vast majority of standards?
We'll get to that. We're getting there.
Okay.
We're just doing high school classes right now.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead, Aaron, and then I've got another way to have other people do our work.
I'm going back to the first set of VSA testimony from late January when they went through with a lot more of the sort of research behind it, and the suggestion there, the policy recommendation was require minimum average class sizes through the EQS and district board policy, which I don't think we've talked about as a mechanism, to be implemented by FY27. The Agency of Education should approve exceptions based on geographic necessity that should be defined in law, which is again gets back to the work that we've been unable to do.
So that's another way you could do it.
Yeah,
Right? This
what-
is all
I
this
know.
is truly
Do whatever
all
you want.
policy. I one of the things I love about having the education portfolio is we are not as hamstrung by federal laws and what other states are doing as some of my colleagues, right? So it's a lot of room for creativity, but that also means there's a lot of room for you all to make choices. So you could put nothing in statute and just direct the state board to make rules. You could put something in statute and then to require the state board rules, comply or do not conflict with. You could put something in statute and then require further guidance in the state board rules. You could put nothing in the state board rules, put something in the guidance and require each school district to come up with their own, which is, so this EQS does have, I think their class size maximums. And there is a requirement that each school district have policies related to class sizes. So that is a thing that already exists, but if you're looking for consistency and you're giving every school district the ability to make its own choices, that's fine. That's a policy choice, but you have to live with the consequence of there being very different choices made.
We are looking for consistency
Yeah.
across the state.
Yeah.
And I think I would say.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Or you could do 3 layers, right? Statute, state board, and then there
Required
still has
policy.
to be school district policies. How much those can vary would be up to what you do in statute and rule.
It would be just needlessly duplicative to put in statute class size minimums and then require school districts to adopt
Right.
a class size minimum policy that is the same as what's in statute.
I think that would be a question for the field on whether that's
Right.
needlessly
But
duplicative.
is their policy just about the size or what they do about it when it happens?
Yeah.
Because the policy might include like, here's what we're gonna do, if we don't have enough, they're gonna go to this school, or.
Yeah, so maybe it's better to stay out of policy
Best.
and let districts take what's in statute or state board rule and figure out their own policies regarding such things as intra-district choice or transfer or whatever. Just as an example, going back to Ripton,
Yeah.
they adopted a class size policy and then said the superintendent, if you can't meet it, the superintendent has the power to
Yeah.
assign students to other schools. That would be more of a local choice of
Yes.
how you address it,
Yes.
which I'm kind of okay with
I am too.
myself. Okay, back to this high school issue. I might say perhaps we could ask the VSA for some suggested guidance on that language.
Can I just ask one more question? So is, in our menu of options are, if we put the minimums that we've been discussing in statute, maybe they also live in state board rules, but are we allowed to give, fleshing out the exceptions to the state board?
Yes.
Yes, right? That's an option.
Right.
To like put in what we agree on and let them kind of hash out the exceptions.
Right, that becomes a question of what guidance we want to give them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay,
I assume at a minimum, we're gonna hear that we have to give CTE as an exception. Maybe not.
yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. You probably can't safely have
Right, I
20
think it
kids
varies
in
on
a
the program.
forestry program with chainsaws. All right, come on, people.
What else? What else?
What
So
We
we're
gotta figure out how we are going to deal with exceptions for the fact that
Right.
certain high school classes cannot exist if you have class size minimum of 20.
Right.
I think we let the state school board figure that out.
The State Board of Education,
Yeah.
have them provide guidance on,
Let them figure out how they're gonna handle it if schools don't meet whatever we set as the numbers after 2 years.
yeah, no, I'm thinking, I mean, I think in general that works, but the specific issue of high school electives is what I was referring to.
The exceptions.
Yeah, I'm saying the exceptions.
Well, actually, I like the way you said it. You said something like, overall, the English department should have.
I'm pulling from the Montpelier policy.
Yeah, I
that
thought that
sort
was-
of, across a
Because-
content
But that's not
area.
really an
And that,
exception.
and that covers, say, maybe the low end, where you might not have a full class, but it's, kind of remedial, whatever, and it might cover your higher end, where maybe you get 16 kids in your AP. Fantastic course.
I mean, I think that's a good idea, especially because if you're averaging it out, we already are seeing, we've heard testimony to the fact that as you get into the 11th and 12th grades, look at everything that's pulling kids now between
Well, yeah.
CTE and
College,
college,
early
or
college.
college, and then like our,
Yeah.
APs, like,
Yeah.
so if we wanna have in public schools substantial offerings for 11th and 12th grade students,
Yes.
then we need to be able to make those exceptions.
So how do we,
Well, the way the Montpelier policy deals with 9 through 12 is it says, content area is a group of courses within a specific licensing area, like English, social studies, science, math, etc. Because the minimums and maximums apply to content areas, an individual class could be smaller than minimum or larger than the the average applies to the whole licensing area.
Yes.
Like all of social studies, all of English, not your individual English classes.
That actually makes
So
sense.
you might have
So you,
smaller 12th grade English classes, but you still have 12th grade English classes even if a bunch of kids have gone to early college.
I worry about some of our other specials, like our band and our chorus.
Well, they have a different.
They're listed too.
They actually literally have different. The way Montpelier does this is they
Okay.
literally have lower minimums
Okay.
for PE and music. We have not entertained that yet. I'm just saying that's a specific.
so in a lot of places you pull the maximum from band.
I know.
Yeah.
COVID pretty much killed band and
Yeah.
design across the state. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's awful.
But the maximum average is 40, they in band.
Yeah.
In Montpelier, they
Yeah, you
have
have
a
40
huge
kids.
maximum.
Yeah, I mean, you want it.
It's a big,
Okay, this is pretty highly prescriptive, which is sometimes not our nature,
Right.
but it's pretty, sounds pretty good. Should we ask legislative council to kind of work some of that?
I don't, which
just
part?
Just the grade band.
Like using some of the Montpelier
Yeah,
language?
yeah.
Just a question, and that's the only high school policy around this that we have to look at?
I don't know.
Right?
Somebody
and
just sent
so-
it to
Yeah, I
me. It's
saw
like,
that.
this
That's
might
the
be
only one I've
helpful.
seen.
Yeah.
I'd love
So
to
we
see.
I'd like to see more
we
than
could,
one.
maybe Kate could look at U32's,
If you have a policy.
policy, look to see what St. Albans has. Wasn't everybody, maybe we'll just make
Check
this
your
a weekend
local high
assignment.
schools.
Mm-hmm.
See if you can find a class-size policy for high schools, for your high school.
I think we're all probably looking at.
No, like we literally
all
talked
right.
about this.
Let's take
Do you
10
want me to take
minutes
Lake Region and North Country? Do
to
you got, like,
just
this in
talk
Harrisburg?
about
I don't think he's
if
Have a
you
really
can't
good
make
outlook
class size
for-
minimums,
If you can't.
that you go before the state board.
I'll check those two.
I don't want, and I'm using go before the state board, maybe as Josh suggested, it's a letter, which I think is probably a better starting point.
A petition.
Because they're gonna
You
review
may
it.
petition the state board.
Yeah. Check class size person.
Do you want to see what's in current law?
Yeah, that'd
Yes,
be great.
Please, yes,
Yeah.
please. Let's not reinvent.
I'll check Dan.
Everybody, we'll stop at 5, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we've got the secretary coming in.
All right.
So annually, the secretary determines whether students are provided substantially equal educational opportunities. And if the secretary determines that a school is not meeting education quality standards, I'm right here,
The secretary, not the state board in this case.
Yeah.
we're getting there.
Yeah.
Then the secretary shall describe in writing the actions that a district must take in order to meet the standards and shall provide technical assistance. And then if the school fails to meet the standards or make sufficient progress within 2 years of that determination, then the secretary shall recommend to the state board one or more of the following actions. Continue to provide technical assistance for one more cycle review, so that would, I believe, be 2 years reading this. The state board adjusts SU boundaries or responsibilities of the superintendent. The secretary assume administrative control over an individual school district, or SU, including budgetary control. The state board close a school and require that the district pays tuition, or the state board require 2 or more districts to consolidate their governance structures. I have some questions about that one.
Yeah.
But this is what's in current law, and then there's a due process piece here. So the state board offering the school board has to offer the school board an opportunity for a hearing. They would either dismiss the secretary's recommendation or order one of those recommendations, and it has to be the least intrusive, consistent with the need to provide students substantially equal educational opportunities. And then they could appeal to their local circuit court.
Certainly a multi-year process.
There's your glad coach.
It should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And I will point out that.
So it's really, it's secretary action to start,
Just-
which is frankly probably a little more quick and direct,
Yeah.
but without the power to like do something draconian. The secretary would have the power to offer help and guidance.
Yeah, I must not be in this section. Oh yeah, so you have here, like, there are references to throughout that just say like, if someone is not meeting this standard, then we're referring back to this process. So like that would be pretty consistent with, if you're adding something to EQS, this is the process. You don't have to, you can make something new up.
That we lost you on the screen.
I know, I took it off so that, cause I thought we wanted to.
All right, great.
Being consistent.
Kate, is that your hand up?
It is. I was in and out this afternoon, but I will say that I'm not in the same place with the numbers that the committee is at. I'm still at the 12, 15, 18 that the VSA and the VSBA, I don't know, are at. And I'm fairly certain that Emily Long is in the same place. I don't think we're gonna get to the numbers, going back to what Leanne was saying. Our 11th and 12th grade is sometimes, like this year at E32, decimated by the fact that we have over 30 kids going to early college. And there's, even it being a relatively big school in this area, we're not gonna get to 20. And I don't even think if you put Montpelier kids into U32, then we would get to 20. Depending on how many kids are headed off to the Career Center, how many are going to early college, and how many are choosing another path like VTDLC.
Would we if we ended our early college program?
Yes. I mean, that's one option. We could also say that you can count those as phantom students.
For purposes of phantom students do not solve the problems that we are kind of trying to identify though, which is still decimated classes of electives. Phantom students will not help in this unless they can pre-record some Harkness comments.
Very general.
Just in terms of
Very general statements.
It helps with the numbers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think we might twist ourselves up if we try to solve two problems at once. Like, we could talk about what's fair in terms of applying the minimums we've been talking about, and then, like, the larger piece that you're raising is definitely how do we fix, bodies in public schools. But I don't know, I feel like tackling those both simultaneously might be tricky.
Right.
But.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to be flip, like, you're right, the
No,
phantom
no.
students would solve if all
No,
we're
you're right,
looking
yeah.
at is numbers, but
Yeah.
we have got a bigger issue.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I don't think we're gonna,
Yeah.
because that has significant implications on the health of our state college system. That's a broader discussion that we're probably not gonna solve.
But I think that's what you're nodding to. Do we sort of add whatever early college so that it is not further exacerbating a problem, not educationally, but from the sort of financial
Right.
accounting side of things? And then this is a reminder to us, the short list of sticky things swirling around everything that we haven't even begun to start to solve. CTE, pre-K, early college is still there and it is not going back.
I might say that, where was I going with this? We could take that, when one is unable to meet, and we're talking high school here, meet the class size minimum, part of the due process, or part of the consideration by the secretary has to be, has to include the number of students in non-campus flexible pathways programs.
That is one of the exceptions noted in the Montpelier policy as flexible pathways.
That seems fair. I mean, it doesn't solve the
No,
lesson.
actually,
So it doesn't solve the problem, but it at least
it
says,
seems
allows
fair.
a high school to say, yeah, we can't meet these because of other state
Things
educational
you've done.
priorities.
But if we
Yeah.
have these bodies back here, it would meet the
Yeah.
requirements.
And I think a high school could easily make the argument and say, we would like to get there, but we couldn't even get there if one of our neighboring high schools closed. The high school part is very tricky. I think it's gonna have to just sort of, we're gonna have to make it so that, how the number applies, sort of in an average as opposed to a per classroom, and then sort of the petitioning for all of the factors that make hitting those numbers impossible despite one's best efforts. And then, if we were to use the state, or the policy we just saw, or the procedure we just saw on the screen, there's nothing immediate. Basically, the secretary, i.e. the AOE, works with the school to help them achieve the goal. And then ultimately, if they can't, then it goes before the state board. So it's a fairly gentle process. That was me talking myself into something.
It's like a 4-year process.
This is a pretty long process.
Because 2 years of not doing it, a year of help,
Yeah.
then you go before the board.
But also, I mean, it's good though, because it gives communities
Yes.
lots of time to
Yes.
think about, like, this is the reality of the situation, what do we want?
Plan.
Yeah, and you know, we gotta remember, we are creating new districts with new boards that may be addressing these problems before they happen. I mean, I realize we are talking about class size minimums before that happens, but in the grander scheme of things, this is why we're doing larger districts and more nimble boards, is to be able to address these things. All right, we'll hit the pause button, take 5 minutes, and we'll be back with the secretary.
What's the problem?
All right, let's go behind.
I am the problem.
All right, you are going live. Press the ready button. And you're live.
Okay, this is House Education, Friday, March 21st, 2025. For our final portion of the day, we're going to hear from the Secretary of Education and the Deputy Secretary of Education. We're really sort of blending sort of two topics, I would say. One, we have asked for some more sort of feedback and information around the $4 million that was asked for in the budget. And I had also asked for just some things that we've been discussing, putting into legislation, that part of it's from the governor's proposal, as well as just other things. Proposal for a statewide calendar, a proposal for a proposal timeline and plan for support and implementation of a single state student information system, financial management system, a proposal for how AOE will resource and support new districts in combining collective bargaining agreements, all of that, and then some other things. So I think the testimony today is going to be both about that and about the $4 million, because they are intertwined. So what we have posted on the website is a lengthy narrative that sort of breaks down a lot of sort of the future ideas in terms of support and the funding behind it. Anyway, floor is yours. Thank you very much for popping up and down and trying to meet all of the needs of all of the committees in this building.
Yeah.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Zoe Saunders, Secretary of Education.
Jill Briggs Campbell, Deputy Secretary of Education.
And as Representative Conlon mentioned, we're hoping to address a lot of your questions with today's testimony. We do have additional detail around how the Agency of Education intends to support the transformation process. We have that broken down by the 3 main buckets of where we are providing focus, which is intended to support operational and budget needs, academic needs, and also supporting with the board transition. We've had a lot of conversations with this committee and others around capacity building, and so we really wanted to be explicit around how we see this also as a capacity building opportunity for the agency. In doing some additional refinement on our proposal, we are actually including in the proposal 5 permanent positions as part of this budget proposal. So we will outline today how we see those positions supporting with the transformation, and then as we move to the future state, how they are really embedded within our team at the agency. These positions will be operating within the context of our current teams and will benefit from the resources and support and expertise of our divisions, and also there will be support from consultants that have specific subject matter expertise or specialization in the work that we are doing. So we're excited to bring that forward. Some of the specific questions that you had around the activities that will happen throughout the transformation process are addressed through this plan. We've contemplated the specific resources and activities that are needed, and want to emphasize also that we recognize this work is multi-year. And so as we're putting forward this proposal, we've built in really 2 years of preparation and readying our system to move into that first year of the new governance structure and the new foundation formula. Understanding that that's not the end of transformation, that is where we get to switching to a new funding formula, which will allow us to be more stable, more predictable, and ensure consistent and equitable resources. But there's additional work contemplated beyond fiscal year 28 that's really achieving our broader educational quality goals, and a lot of additional community input as we're thinking about really strengthening the new districts. So with that, I will turn it over to Jill Briggs-Campbell to just walk through the details of that transformation plan. And if you could, as you're walking through, just touch on and emphasize how this work is supportive of some of the specific tasks that you're interested in looking at, including contract management, debt management, I think calendar, all of those things that you had noted. We have contemplated as part of the plan in this transformational process in the next 2 years, we've identified specific milestones to getting there.
Sounds good. It feels like it's been a minute since we've been here. Yeah. So yeah, and I also want to signal that we have released some additional modeling of the 5 district budgets. So we had our partners at New Solutions K-12 sort of did a sort of a sample budget for a sort of theoretical district whose demographic characteristics looked like Vermont. And what we heard was, okay, but what about the 5 district budgets? So I think you've received those.
I don't know.
I will ensure that you've received those. And so really went back and looked at, each building, current enrollment, student demographics, teacher salaries, the whole 9 yards, and built the budgets really based on the 5 proposed districts. So you'll have that available as a resource, and of course we can always have Nate and other folks come back in. And then this afternoon, you will receive a summary of the work to date with our policy sprint teams, and that work, again, kind of that reminder was we put together work groups of experts from the field around specific areas of our policy proposal to surface considerations. Many of the considerations that you've actually heard in testimony we've captured as well, and I think that you'll see a lot of those considerations reflected in what we're going to discuss today. So that was really productive work thus far. So you'll have that summary, and with it all of the notes. So just as we've done with all of our other reporting, you'll get the high-level summary and then kind of all of the raw data that went into it as well as a reference. So that hopefully can continue to inform the development of really, how do we implement this work? What are the steps? What are the contingencies, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll move through this, and folks can feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go. As Secretary Saunders signaled, we have recognized from the very beginning that the kind of transformational work that we're proposing really needs sustained and focused support from the Agency of Education and other state partners. That was reflected in the original $4 million request, and as we've done that work with Policy Sprint and really are trying to be responsive to some of the critical areas of need that have been identified, we've refined this proposal to be reflective of that. I think the other key point that Secretary Saunders just raised, so I want to put a highlight under it, is that these positions and sort of the consultants that we're contemplating with this $4 million request is not the only source of support. This is agency-wide priority for, you know, the next 3 years and beyond. And as part of our strategic planning and sort of realignment of agency structures, we would absolutely be looking at how we would be driving support to the field. And I have that sort of in the additional considerations section sort of below, so we can talk about that as well. What is sort of new here is a request for 5 permanent positions. So you would see them, they're part of the $4 million request here, but they would be part of base funding moving forward. And really 5 targeted positions that are really meant to address some specific areas of need and concern. But also these positions then become integral to ongoing agency efforts to support district quality in terms of operations and facilities, and then also education quality moving forward. So these team members will really be the kind of core of that work moving forward. So position 1 and 2, the business operations and data integration support specialists would really be working very closely together. All of these positions are very much working out in the field and convening inter-district teams to really ensure that by the time we get to fiscal year 28, so July 1 of 2027, in particular, we need to ensure that by that date we have back office systems that are integrated and cohesive, as well as really having made a lot of moves to strengthen, coordinate, and integrate practices around curriculum, graduation requirements, proficiency-based grading, a lot of those kind of MTSS systems of support, those kind of high leverage education quality standards, as well as looking at really aligning teaching and learning practices, which may be different from district to district, and we can give some specific examples. So what is our goal with these positions is really to ensure that we are well on our way to critical integration by July 1 of 2027. Some of the work must be done by then, right? Things like your business operations systems must be fully integrated. Some of the work will be ongoing around sort of education quality and some of the school facilities work. So the business operations support specialist is really tasked with supporting districts in the integration of disparate accounting, HR, and other back office functions. We know that one of our challenges across our systems, right, is that there's a lot of variability in the kinds of systems they're using. The way that they use uniform chart of accounts is not as uniform as we would like it to be. Budgeting practices, some of these districts will be supervisory districts that have to generate one budget every year, and others are supervisory unions that have to generate 10 budgets every year. So how do we integrate those budgeting practices? They will, as I said, really be convening inter-district teams to do that work, and then also will really be that critical kind of point of contact surfacing to the rest of the agency areas where there's guidance, tools, training, and other support that is needed to keep this work moving forward. They'll play a key role also if the state is contemplating moving towards single financial, statewide financial systems, student information systems. They will really be ensuring, with the lessons that we've learned from past initiatives, that district needs and goals and state needs and goals are aligned and contemplated, so that we really are ensuring that whatever a statewide system might be is actually going to be sophisticated and meet the needs of districts as they require to be successful. This work would also be done in very close collaboration with the data integration support specialist. Again, really recognizing a need to ensure that all of these disparate data systems are fully integrated, and there's a multitude of lists of those. And also, again, if we're looking at single statewide data systems, would really be that person who is operating between the agency and the field, and any consultants that the agency brings on board to help us with alignment of our data infrastructure. So those two positions will be working on the ground a lot with district teams. Again, this is one of those places where what must we achieve by July 1, 2027, all of these systems need to be integrated and kind of ready to switch on. I'll sort of jump down. If we look at the sort of last position, which is listed as position 4, but sure, we'll go numerically, call it position 5. The school facilities support specialist is a position that I would see would have work to do over the next 2 years, but really this is a very long-term field position that would be working with district staff to really be looking at their portfolio of buildings, being able to provide facilities condition data, enrollment trends, feeding patterns for attendance, transportation patterns, and other local considerations, really being able to help district teams as they're looking at their portfolio of buildings and looking at things like grade realignment or consolidation or efficiencies in transportation routes, some of that need that's really been surfaced. One of the reasons that I really wanted to ensure that this was there is I have phone calls with facilities directors all the time right now. They're sort of constantly calling me. We've been having these conversations for quite a long time. We have a lot of folks in the field that have been trying to think about ways to make their buildings more efficient or consolidate or realign grades. And one of the barriers that they've always had, and I literally had a phone call just 2 days ago, is even within our supervisory unions, you may have multiple elementary schools, but they sit in different school districts. Mm-hmm. And so it's like there's a great wall of China, right, between all of those districts, right? So not only how do we contemplate if you were looking at, just a supervisory district structure, but if we were actually merging multiple districts together, how might you actually look at your portfolio of buildings? So being able to have someone who's in the field long-term, really working with folks, and then always sort of looking to that future state of like, what are the potential, expansion of maybe one facility so that it could accommodate 40 more students or whatever that may be, with that long-term eye towards what are the improvements to facilities that need to happen. The two positions in the middle are really focused on ensuring that in a period of disruption that we are really protecting learning and teaching, but also that we leave this system actually stronger and more integrated, and really raising the bar for sort of school quality in learning and teaching and sort of this education quality standards. This is work that has sort of these two positions, but would absolutely be supported by whole teams of agency staff that have a lot of subject matter expertise and content area expertise to help support this work. So these are very long titles. I don't anticipate, they're descriptive of the work. So both of these positions will be working, again, really closely together and with agency staff. The first, the Curriculum and Education Quality Standards Integration Specialist, I already sort of signaled this, right? Because as a state, we really don't have a lot of standardization, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, we don't have minimum state graduation requirements. Proficiency-based grading approaches are really different, not only from district to district, but oftentimes school to school, sometimes classroom to classroom. Things like the way different local assessments that are used, local benchmark assessments, and the way that they do or do not integrate with statewide assessment, which does or does not integrate with proficiency-based learning standards, right? So lots of work to do here, as I call it, sort of hooking up all the plumbing. And so really having someone that can bring together different districts, both of these positions really looking at the current practices, the current standards, the current policies, and really helping districts in integrating their practices. And for example, we have some districts that are years down the road in doing science-based reading instruction, right? And then right next door, we have a district who may not be doing that at all right now or is just taking the first steps. So how do we ensure that by the time we get to larger district sizes, I think this is really an area of opportunity to kind of help and support these other districts by, having their peers and building leaders really kind of building that culture of, this is the best practice for learning and teaching, and we're going to support that work. So these two positions, again, long-term work, are really supported by agency teams that will be doing this work as part of our strategic planning, but really wanting to ensure that we're leaving the system stronger through a period of disruption and beyond. So those are the positions. I can pause.
Well, maybe that's a good idea.
Okay.
Are there questions just on the positions themselves? We can, and if people don't have questions now, at the end, it's fine too, of course. Jana?
What's the hope in terms of when you would ideally like to have these folks in place?
So we can never hire until we have an appropriation. But if we saw that this was the direction that things were going, we would get the positions, described, ready to go, and we're aiming for early fall would be our goal. That would be moving at light speed for the state of Vermont. But I actually have some confidence in this because we did this in COVID, so we know we've got some muscle memory on moving quickly.
Representative Brady?
Do you have any sort of tools at your disposal about pay scale and like who you can hire, high quality people that may be leaving the field as we transform, but would be tremendous assets at the statewide level, but really pay cuts are difficult. We know it's part of the challenge at state agencies in general. Is there any glimmer of hope there?
Yes. We've actually, I think we haven't had a chance to sort of chat lately.
Yeah.
We've actually been doing some pretty intentional work around this with some of our kind of critical vacancies and making moves to better align the high level of skill and knowledge that we need for some positions with competitive pay scales.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that with some of our other vacancies as well, and would anticipate doing so with these positions as well. But yes, it's always a challenge. And we think that there's some incredibly talented people in the field that we would love. We've talked about this, right? Where is the expertise?
Yes.
And it would be great if more of the expertise that we have at the field was up at the state level, so we're supporting more students with those skills and knowledge than we currently are.
And a quick policy question, did I hear, we're trying to get some timeline things really clear. You're intending for student information systems and finance systems to be standard statewide by 2027?
So let's
that
clarify that.
aspirational?
Yeah. So aspirational. So what we're identifying is that there is a lot of work involved in identifying how to do system integration and then actually integrating and system adoption. Right, statewide.
That's right.
That is
I wanted to be sure.
Yeah, so that is a very long process, but what we are being intentional about is ensuring that we have the resources focused on that to identify and do that important mapping. There's a whole inventory process that's required, and then there's a mapping, and then there's defining user requirements both at the state level and the district level that would be involved. So we would intend to have a report back to the General Assembly next year after doing that review around what that system integration should look like, what the cost would be, and the timeline. Knowing that that's a very big lift, I want to call out that there are other mechanisms to collect and align data. So we currently are operating in an ecosystem where districts have a lot of different systems. And so we have done intentionally work at the agency to improve our ability to collect that information, clean it, and map it. And so there's a tool we implemented just this year called EdFi, kind of describe it as a vacuum. It kind of takes all the information from all the different systems, and then there's coding and mapping that does to align that. So we would expect that, like with any adoption, there would need to be a bridge to getting there. And so we have refined our tools, and we do have expertise managing multiple systems that's continuing to improve. This is actually the first year of the full implementation of that EdFi instrument. And so we can continue to refine that, and we would expect to do so over this transition period, knowing that full system integration would take longer. So we want to be realistic.
Continue.
Okay. And so you have already seen sort of the next section, which was really looking at those kind of three buckets, right? And obviously the positions are tied to that. We also want to signal that some of this work that we're talking about doing is work that is highly complex and needs a level of expertise and across multiple systems that really would benefit from having some consultant expertise. So some of this, the work that the positions would be tasked with is going to be supported, and agency kind of strategic priorities like strengthening our accountability and education quality framework really would need to be supported with someone who can help us manage the multiple systems. And by help us manage, I mean help agency staff to do the work of managing and integrating multiple systems. So that is sort of what was outlined kind of in our original request. And it would be temporary work. So it's like a surge of work that would be supported by consultants, leaving the agency better able to support the field long term, and being able to accelerate that work. So if there's questions around that, I think you've seen it before, so I don't want to.
You're talking about the financial transformation?
Yeah, financial transformation, the kind of academic accountability, and then the school board support and transformation is very much sort of it's not usually an agency function, but we would want to bring in sort of additional resources and supports for new districts, and also kind of districts that, I'm trying to say school boards, it's the end of Friday. Support for new school boards as they're looking kind of towards a new way of doing governance and budgeting and really being able to build those skills. So that was that work. And then I think if folks can go to page 5 with me. Again, signaling that in really doing this work with the policy sprint teams and being able to kind of hear some of the feedback that's been surfaced in areas of concern, really signaling that this is agency-wide support as a key area of focus. And so some of the team members, so we know kind of who our full-time members of our district transformation support team is. They actually have a team leader doing a lot of that coordination and communication. Other agency staff that would really need to be engaged in this work would be members of our child nutrition team, supporting the integration of food services and other child nutrition programs, early childhood education team, supporting implementation of any changes to pre-K funding and delivery, our CTE team, supporting integration and alignment of CTE centers into the new governance and funding structure we've proposed, an academic advancement team, which includes our special education team, led by our chief academic officer. That position was posted yesterday, which is really exciting. And Rep. Brady, to your point, this is a way that we're actually trying to elevate some positions to ensure that we're able to get the level of expertise and knowledge and experience that the agency really needs.
Could I pause you there and just could you just expand a little bit more on that sort of restructuring within the agency and the creation of this position?
Yeah. So very early on in my tenure, I was hearing requests from the field for the agency to have stronger leadership and support in the academic area, and that translated both to supporting with school improvement, reviewing data, also providing recommendations and resources for high quality instructional materials. And so as we looked at, as I looked at kind of our organizational structure, I was seeking opportunities to kind of realign some vacancies to elevate a role and a focus on academics, and so was able to do that in creating this new position, the Chief Academic Officer, and will support a lot of the integration that we're doing. As we've noted, similar to many organizations, we sometimes operate in silos, and so the intention and the work that we're really doing at the agency is ensuring that our content experts are situated in places within the agency to really guide that work. And so the Chief Academic Officer will be overseeing that integration and making sure, as we think about special education, that we're also talking about really focusing on improving Tier 1 instruction, because it's not just around special education, it's around providing the training and support for every student to have the best educational experience in the most inclusive environment possible. So those are the teamings that we've done are very supportive of this role coming in and helping to provide that coordination. So we're excited.
And that would free up, so you have somebody focus on that, so the chief of operations would have more time to be the chief of operations.
Yeah, so yeah, within the structure, there's a chief of operations, also serves as our deputy and chief academic officer. And just, there's a lot of intentionality and really thinking about that overlap and making sure that it's mutually supportive of achieving our educational goals.
So we have this sort of academic advancement team led by the chief academic officer, supported by those 2 ed quality positions that I already signaled, and then really leveraging our subject matter and content experts, a special education team, to really be able to help drive this integration both at the agency level and then across districts, really with that goal of, again, leaving a system that's actually stronger, more integrated, and has more consistency. This was something that we, again, heard really loud and clear from educators, is educators want to be able to do in their classroom like their own special sauce, right? Like every educator has their own vibe and their own approach, but having to recreate the wheel in every classroom in every school is really duplicative of effort and doesn't leave as much time for learning and teaching, which is what we really want folks to be focused on. There's also operations team led by the chief of operations, that would be me, really coordinating with the data integration support, fields, school facilities support, and business operations support specialist, leading the work of our finance, DMAT, operations teams to ensure that we're really able to support the field, and then also driving towards kind of those improvements in process at the agency level so that we are more timely, more accurate, more responsive, and really pointing towards those district and education quality standards long term. And then finally, signaling something really important here that we've really kind of known early on and often, but really want to kind of articulate clearly, is that this work of education transformation is not just the agency of education and school districts, right? This really is work that needs to have interagency support, community partnership. This is long-term transformation that is really meant to revitalize and support communities, particularly some of our rural and high needs communities. So, some of the kind of groups that might need to be included in at the table, obviously staff from ACCD around housing and community development programs, really being able to support communities as they sort of contemplate, if they are contemplating school consolidation or closure, really being able to spend the time in being planful and supportive of those communities so that they're not experiencing, school closure on an emergency basis, which we have a recent example of, and sort of the pain that has caused for those communities. So how do we support that on the front end? Also a recognition that this kind of work is stressful, and really ensuring that we have our partners at the Department of Mental Health and VDH ready, willing, and able to support districts, schools, communities throughout this. A&R and DEC for PCBs and other considerations like PFAS and wastewater and all of those kinds of things. Staff from the Agency of Agriculture, right, to support the kind of food service and school nutrition programs. ADS to help with the data integration and infrastructure. It kind of goes on and on and on. So it's sort of an all hands on deck approach that would really have the agency kind of leading this work.
So this could, I sort of look at this and I go, well, how do you go from words to actually creating it? I assume this is sort of the role of the governor.
That's right.
He creates this team and says, now do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's right. And then finally, as we kind of go to the last page, I wanted to signal some additional considerations and support. There's 1,001 questions with all of this, and so I didn't want to not address a couple of the questions and needs that I've heard surfaced, and were also surfaced in our sprint teams. So one is a question around legal support. I'll just sort of say very plainly, the agency does not provide legal support and guidance to districts. Like, that's just not our function. We never do that. But we understand that there's a need for that support. In addition, we heard through the sprint teams really a need for districts to be resourced with communications and like community engagement support. So one thing that we've been contemplating is the idea of some education transformation grants that would roll out in FY27. And I've done some back of napkin math, but would like to have that math refined. And then the other thing that we have identified as a need, and the field was actually really great partners in surfacing this, is at some point you need to stand up these new central offices and get them working, right? You can't stand them up on July 1, 2027. So there's going to be a cost to, in essence, filling, like sort of double filling positions, right? Not a one-to-one, obviously, but for the new district offices, that's, yeah. And so that also would go into those education transformation grants is one potential vehicle for how you would fund that.
Is that included in the 4 million?
It is not included in the 4 million. And as I said, I've got some back of napkin math, but of course the more future state districts you have, the more expensive that gets. Yes. So we've done some modeling on it. Again, I would like the opportunity to validate some of my thinking with the field, but I was using salaries.
Yes, we've learned about back of napkin estimates.
Yes, that's right. I was using, their salary data and that sort of thing to do some of that work. But I think that that's a vehicle by which you could ensure that that support is available.
And it's not contemplated in the 4 million because it would be for fiscal year 27. So
yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think you would anticipate that as we've done this sort of analysis and in FY26 really doing this kind of inventory and kind of gap analysis, and that you would anticipate that we would return in FY20 for the FY27 budget and say these are the resources that we've identified as well. Casey, where are you throwing pens at me? It's so late in the day.
Thank you.
All right, questions and comments from the committee. I just would like to acknowledge that this is kind of a big deal. This has been a governor who has been loath to create new positions, and we have 5 here. I think that this goes frankly a long way to addressing the concern we've heard over and over about why are we doing big things when we continually have questions of capacity at the agency, longstanding, predated both of you. Just wanted, this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We heard really clearly through our listen and learn tour that there have been challenges in the past, both for the agency and the field, to implement major legislation. And so I think for this request definitely signals the governor's very deep commitment to this work and understanding around a need to build and strengthen the agency of education to support not only in the interim, but recognizing the importance of these roles into the future. These roles are really focused on quality and expanding our capacity to support with district quality and education quality, and it really does align with the structure we're putting forward with the chief academic officer and the chief operational officer, and really rounding out those teams to provide the support. This allows us to have extended reach into the field. And I think that's a really important point to note. We've heard the field saying we actually want the agency closer, right, in the field working with us. We've talked about Read Vermont and how we're modeling that by actually bringing coaches into the field. Again, this is a consistent commitment that we're signaling to increasing our capacity to be in the field, to be a stronger partner. And so to appreciate that recognition, because it really is a strong commitment that we're bringing forward.
I appreciate that these seem to be all outwardly focused positions.
Yes,
they are.
And I think hopefully the next time we come in, we'll actually have some good news to share on some critical vacancies.
On some vacancy.
Yep,
that was going to be
we've
my
been
next
making
question.
some excellent progress.
Great progress. Yeah, we're excited.
We just that this doesn't preclude or replace sort of existing work.
It doesn't.
In terms of vacancies and duties, just that are work that needs to happen and make it harder in our federal landscape on just the day-to-day. So,
have you had a chance to sort of take this, run it through your council to find out if frankly, any of it other than appropriating money requires any further legislative work on our part. And if you haven't, I would just suggest that that happen.
Ask the question again.
So it was just, has this?
Like any vetting of the position?
Yeah, I'm not trying
specifically?
to, all I'm saying is like, other than money, what do you need from us to sort of make, is there any role for us in this?
I gotcha.
Probably not, just because these are positions that the AOE has created.
Mm-hmm.
I think the step is appropriating the positions.
Yeah.
That would be the immediate next step.
Representative Brady?
I think this is probably an unanswerable question for all of us, but that last point about like education transformation grants and sort of the carrying costs of old districts at the same time as new districts, not included in the 4 million. So there may need to be additional requests in future years for transformation costs and the ongoing process, knowing it's going to be on whoever's timeline a multi-year process. Is that
It will
somewhat safe to assume?
It will definitely be a multi-year process. And we are being intentional around thinking about, there are some cost containment strategies built into that, but in terms of kind of specialized support for a system-wide adoption, we would need to contemplate those costs. And we're also mindful that there would need to be a bridge, right, in being able to support existing systems. So those are going to have to be ongoing conversations that we need to be thoughtful and strategic around how we're investing dollars to achieve those goals.
And I know that some of the questions that I've heard surfaced in this committee as well is, who does X, Y, or Z, right? And there's, we were sort of talking about, it's like we almost need a RASCI chart, right? So like, who actually does who is responsible for collective bargaining, right? I think we would say the agency would not be the appropriate entity to manage collective bargaining, right?
But it might be the appropriate entity to resource
That's right.
districts to be able to do that work.
Yeah. So I think it's like that level of, these are all a lot of mechanical questions that it's like if you were sitting down and drawing up a work plan, you would begin to start to answer those questions. And I think it helps us all collectively contemplate this big work and say, okay, there's steps. This is a contingency. We have to actually answer this question before we can answer this. And so I do think, we're in the process of really developing that like detailed punch list, really. And again, the policy sprint teams have been really excellent in that. And so we will have those summary reports coming out to folks so you can see.
Yeah, you probably have noticed that is one of my obsessions of great idea, who's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But actually, there's a list here of who's going to do some of this.
Yeah. Right.
Representative Brady.
Go ahead.
Representative Brown, go
No,
ahead.
I just want to say a member of our committee recently received a copy of your org chart, which was really helpful, and so definitely look forward to as some of these vacancies are being filled and update and just helping us sort of understand how this sort of fits together a little bit more with this would be really great.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Sounds good.
and I can actually share a link with you. I would put a note. If you're ever interested, just so you know, if you're ever interested in any agency's vacancies or recruiting or anything like that, there's a handy dandy dashboard. Because every time I try to do it, something changes the next day and I'm like, well, that's no longer timely. So I can share that with you and you can see right now, I think we have, as of yesterday with the chief of academics, 13 positions posted, of which 5 of those have verbal offers or are in the hiring process. The rest are actively being interviewed. So, as I said, we're actually making a lot of progress in this space.
Exciting.
Yes.
Is there flexibility in this, and this is my lack of understanding of sort of state budgeting, if the timeline that ends up on the sort of path of transformation ends up slightly different from what is in the original, within the proposal from the governor, or particularly like the timeline for a foundation formula, if the reality of full implementation ends up being a year or something later than what was envisioned from your proposal, I guess does that impact or change this? Or is this still workable, knowing that we're all kind of working for some bigger goals in the end, but there's some disagreement about, you know, some of the details and some of the speed of things.
I think we're hearing a lot of those questions around timing, and you know, certainly as we've done this work with the policy sprint teams, there's you know a desire to try to elongate this, and could we spend more time doing this work? I think there is a question around money and the stabilization of our system. That is a really big concern as we're thinking about elongating that timeline, that we would need to understand what is that impact, right, on the taxpayer. And you know, I think there is a lot of uncertainty in the federal funding landscape, which creates, again, another sense of urgency. So while I think there's been an expressed interest in trying to elongate that, there's a practical question of how do we fund our system during those bridge years, knowing that that's going to create a lot of pain on districts right now in having to really go through a very painful process that we continue to experience year over year of facing cuts. So I think that's just something we need to continue to balance.
Questions? Yes, Representative Brown.
Just slightly off topic, so if it's a long answer, we don't necessarily have to talk about it today, but just speaking about uncertainty at the federal level, I know I've heard sort of that different state agencies are sort of staffing up and building capacity in different ways. Is there a specific plan at the Agency of Education around sort of how to build capacity or align capacity to be responsive to potentially big shifts at the federal level?
So a lot of the transformation plan is designed to future-proof our system. So as we initiated our analysis, we identified that we had really significant equity gaps in how we're resourcing our education system. And so part of this plan is to put forward so that we can have achieve the educational quality in a way that is affordable to taxpayers and is also predictable. So in many respects, this proposal is designed to create to really future-proof our system, to make sure that we are stable. Right now, a risk is federal funding. There could be a future risk that is related to other economic conditions, right? And so part of what we're trying to do within this overall proposal is make sure that we have a strong funding system and that it is equitable, because in our current system of how we're drawing down state funds, we're seeing that our higher needs communities tend to spend less per pupil, and that those are the communities that are most dependent on some of the federal dollars, right? So that creates a vulnerability for our system. So broadly speaking, when we're talking about planning, the transformation really is designed to get us into that place where we can be more stable and that we can navigate shifts in federal policy, shifts in economic downturns. Practically speaking, kind of in the short term, our team is working really closely with other state chiefs across the country and really understanding kind of what some of the changes, what the implications are of the changes, so that we can be proactive in planning and supporting the field. There may be some additional flexibility that we have in terms of how we measure our accountability and how we distribute funds, and all of those things are what we're part of exploring. There's still a lot of details that need to be clarified for state agencies to understand the specifics around how we would implement.
But can I offer something that I think is important, and I think that you heard from Ann Bordenaro last week about this. I think it's really important that everyone is aware. Our formula funds are forward funded, so we do not anticipate disruption to the FY26 formula funds. I think that's really important that folks know. We are keeping a very close eye out for what is going to happen in the federal FY26 budget, which is our FY27 state budget. So just wanted to make sure that folks are clear about that, and we're at least reducing that one piece of anxiety, is that our FY26 budgets.
Her explanation was very helpful.
That's
Yeah,
right. She is tremendously helpful in this space, and she actually at CCSSO, which is our kind of state National Professional Association, she was the leader of the federal liaisons for 2 years. So she's very well tied in and is keeping everybody up to date. And she and I will be in DC next week having these conversations, so we can provide an update when we come back.
And we'll continue to provide updates. I do think Anne provided a really incredible testimony. She's quite an expert in this area, and I know is committed to keeping the General Assembly updated. I want to give assurances we are absolutely monitoring, and that there is a longer ramp for us to really think through what those implications are once there's greater specificity. And as we have identified potential impacts in terms of delays of, as Anne had described, the allocations, we're communicating to that in the field. We have protocols to manage that. So just, we'll keep you updated, and we are being mindful and monitoring the situation.
What you just said gave me a little heartburn. This committee has a deadline to move a bill out on Friday.
We don't have a way.
I'm a little concerned to hear that you're both going to be in Washington.
I know, just me.
We divided a conference.
All right, all right, thank you very
got
much.
this one.
I'm here. I'm here
Sorry,
all
you don't
week.
get the trip to Washington.
I missed out.
She gets the next one.
Yeah.
I get the cherry blossoms though.
True, yes.
You'll have her,
That's a great
I think
scene.
in April, I'll be at a conference in.
That's
right,
true.
So we divided.
I do have a question on all of that and just sort of a resource of information. So Secretary French became the COO of the school. I realize he's more of an operational person, but to the extent, is he another resource for sort of keeping an eye on the federal stuff since he's in the national organization?
I expect he'll be pulled away to meet with Jill and Anne frequently.
I would say that actually this is one of those places where I like to brag a little bit that Vermont swings way above its weight class when it comes to CCSSO. So both Anne and I have developed really, really close relationships with the CCSSO kind of federal team, including their amazing legal consultants that they use, and we frequently, like almost daily, we are in contact with them right now, and they're the kind of folks where we can pick up the phone. So Dan is doing CCSO operations, I think, quite happily. We will grab him, but we actually have developed really strong relationships that we leverage frequently. They're on speed dial right now. And also we benefit from being able to surface to them when something is coming up in the state, like throughout COVID, because we are small and because we have very tight relationships with our districts, we have the ability to provide the real world on the ground examples that really needed to be surfaced up to like the Department of Education so they understood the implications of X, Y, or Z in ways that other states just are not able to do. So we have a nice, strong relationship in that space.
I'm sorry, you were just using the past tense when referring to the Department of Education. Yes.
I didn't mean to. It was a slip of the tongue.
Well, the sun is out. It's 4 o'clock on Friday. Good time to stop. Thank you both very
Thank
much.
you. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.